All right, so we're going to be discussing what it's like being LGBTQ plus in STEM. First of all, who am I? I'm Alfredo. Hi, my pronouns are he, him. I'm the chair and founder of STEM, as been introduced. I was last year recognized by Attitude Magazine as the 101 LGBTQ trailblazer in the world. I'm also a physicist, science communicator, and a journalist. But for the scope of this talk, I am a raging homosexual. And why am I raging is because if you're not raging, sorry about that, you're not been paying attention. What do I mean by that? It's the situation in STEM when it comes to supporting historically excluded minorities is rage-inducing. And I mentioned that I'm Italian, so it is very easy for me to just be angry all the time about what is going on. I tend to always say that some science happens in a physical vacuum, but no science happens in an historical one. And whenever we discuss anything that has to do with political areas, we get pushed back. But it is important to stress that science is and always been political. And the idea that science now is political is completely made up by the people that don't want changes and improvement. So if you're raging, you haven't been paying attention. I say that because it is important to have constructive anger because there is a lot of hate and a lot of problems in STEM, and hate slows down progress. Hates discourage individuals from those excluded minorities to become role models, to go ahead. Hate maintains the status quo, and hate distracts us from our work. As I mentioned, there is this thing that science is political, but it isn't. Identity politics, what we discussed today as identity politics, has always been part of science. The only difference is we didn't used to call it identity politics. But let's talk about the LGBTQ community in particular. We find for as much we hear over and over again that scientists and institutions only care about how good is your science and only care about what you do, not who you are. We find that actual studies showed that that is very much not the case. This is from Mattis from 2013, and it's a look in the US at who is out of the closet, being part of the LGBTQ community, between being out at work, being out to their students if they teach, and compared to who's out to their friends and family. And we see that there is a huge difference between who's out to friends and family, and we know that nobody has to be out or nobody can be out, but this is an indication that there are a lot of workplaces that don't make it comfortable to be out at work. Few years later, the American Physics Society ran a different survey to try and understand the sort of climate for LGBTQ people in physics, and they found that harassment is widespread, especially in particular to gender non-conforming and trans people. And there is a lack of awareness of LGBT issues. Employees are expected to not act too gay, which always really send me, I don't know, the anger that I feel about that. It's never stopping. And there is 1/3 being pressured to stay in the closet. Again, for trans and gender non-conforming people, the situation is even worse, there is lack of facilities where they feel comfortable being, in particular toilets. Co-workers don't use their pronouns, and usually this is seen as, oh, this is very US-centric thing, that health benefits doesn't cover trans-related needs. But even in the UK, the situation for trans healthcare is shocking, with people waiting for years and years just to be seen by specialists. And people cannot transition legally without going through medical transitioning. So it is a situation that is incredibly serious also in the UK. These problems are also being pushed on the next generation. LGBT students, so just sexual minority students, that's what the study focused on, are less likely to continue in STEM compared to heterosexual peers, despite sexual minority students having higher grades, having done more undergraduate research compared to the same heterosexual peer. And the two main reasons is they feel that they don't belong, and they don't see anyone like them in the academia. So this is another reason why it's so important to have role models, but also for institutions to be quite forward in advocating for the said minorities. In the UK, the situation is more or less the same. We find that LGBT plus people tend to consider leaving the workplace more often than non-LGBT people, and for a trans respondent, this is even higher percentage, and they consider leaving their workplace in physical sciences often. This is a general view of harassment, exclusionary behavior, intimidation in the workplace by everyone that have responded to the Exploring the Workplace for LGBT Physical Scientists survey, which didn't just include LGBTQ plus people. You find that being non-binary, being trans means that you are much more likely to experience such horrible behavior, and the less people know about your sexuality, the more likely you are to experience such harassment behavior. And although even 10% of heterosexual people experience harassment, which really tells you that there is something rotten at the core of STEM institution if they cannot even tackle it from the wider majority. We also see that there is intersectional issue already, and we're just here focusing on gender and sexuality, but we see how much more women, and in the other panel, the lesbians, get harassment compared to gay men. And it is the major issue is that identities are complex, and it is important, even though we are focusing on a specific aspect of a specific communities, that every intervention needs to be taught intersectionally. Again, this is from the same survey, and we see that a lot of places show that the organization are not good environment to be working in. There is no reason why all those places shouldn't be in green and dark green. A workplace needs to be comfortable or very comfortable for every single person that works there. And the last and the latest study on systemic inequalities for LGBTQ professional is also the first one. So those are pretty much showed you everything there is in scientific literature about LGBTQ stuff in STEM. And this one is the first one to actually approach things intersectionally. So show that across the board, every member of the community experience career limitation, harassment, and professional devaluation. But there are more marginalized people within our community, such as transgender, gender non-binary, and women, racial and ethnic minorities that are more likely to experience different aspects, such worse health outcomes or more professional devaluation. So it is important to understand that all of this is it's part of the greater need for tackling harassment in STEM and to changing STEM culture from every level, on every level. To give you a summary of all the things that I have been telling you, less than 60% of LGBT plus people, Q plus people in STEM are out. 1 in 3 physicists, US physicists have been advised to remain in the closet if they want to succeed. 50% of trans and gender non-conforming people were harassed in their department. LGBT students are 7% less likely to enter a STEM career, and 42% of US physicists advise not to act too gay. So what can we do to change things? And what I argue and what I already mentioned is we need to work towards an inclusive and intersectional revolution. It is important that we're not just focusing on inclusion, but belonging and also justice. We need to make sure that it's not just trying to get people in the door, is making sure that those people that we get them in the door feel that they can succeed to the highest possible level of their career in that institution. And that is only possible if we just think not just at what is stopping them to pursue a career in STEM, but what is making people leave a career in STEM. We see that many LGBTQ plus people in STEM consider leaving their work, and some people consider them leaving them often. To do that, it doesn't just start by knocking down all our institutions and rebuilding them, so that helps. We also need to start looking at ourselves first and foremost. We need to challenge our own biases. We need to understand our privileges. We need to be educated, all of us, on why issues that affect different communities are important, not just our communities, but every communities. And that is fundamental to argue for change, to advocate for change, and mostly because none of us was born with perfect knowledge. We're all always learning, and it is important that we can continue to learn and continue to better ourselves, to make, commit to make the world of science, but the world in general, a better place, to understand how we can bring these changes that support everyone and make STEM a place where everyone is comfortable, very comfortable to work in. They don't have to hide part of themselves. Nobody has to be out of work. They don't want to be out, but everyone should have the certainty that if they decided to be out at work, there would be no problem. There would be no risk to them. And we're not there yet. So some things that we can do at an individual level. If you like, adding pronouns in email, signature, and badges, stuff like that is a very easy step. There are obviously you're supporting member of the community that don't use standard pronouns, but also I say this as a science journalist, sometimes is difficult to work out how to address a person just based on names alone. And having places that you can find, pronouns, it's fantastic when I have to write articles. Try to be an ally proactively, it doesn't mean going always the extra mile, but trying to be there for people when they need you. If you are senior in your organization, share a statement of support. Be, as I said, be proactive. Show that This is important. Show that you are doing the work. And it is important as an education, participate in mentorship and awareness training, simply because we're on this journey of learning, and there are things about the LGBTQ community that I didn't know just a few months ago. And it is by constantly learning and interacting with different people that give you different perspectives, doing courses that you actually find out more and be more effective at being an ally and advocating for change. Again, I'm going to stress these a lot, but remain informed and educate about dog whistle across the board. Social media is both an incredible tool and a monster that we are barely learning to control. I have been brought up with the internet. I got the internet when I was 9. 17 years ago. No, that's a lie. That is more than 17 years ago. 18 years ago. And it has been, that also lies, 27 years ago. My God, I cannot do maths today. And it is, and social media for me has been on my formative years for the last few decades. And yet there are some stuff that I cannot understand, like getting angry on the internet all the time, or not understanding how people use it for evil. We can see how easy it is for people to discuss anti-vax things and how that proliferated. The rising tide of fascism is the same. There are people that are being subtle about targeting minorities. And so it's important that you are aware of dog whistle, because those people are printing those same dog whistle in a major newspaper and acting like there's nothing wrong with they're just asking questions or something like that. Don't be a bystander. Be somebody that the communities can trust to always have their back. And finally, don't let people's rights becoming a matter of debate. That never ends well, because
I don't know
that never ends well when we start debating the rights of one group of people like they don't matter. At an organization level, maybe start thinking, if you're refurbishment, having gender neutral toilets, or changing some toilets to be gender neutral, that it doesn't just help non-binary people, but also people with anxiety, people with different needs. Remember important days and mark them. Pride months, local pride parades, LGBT History Month, LGBTQ plus STEM Day. Have transitioning at work policies. This is very important, mostly because it is something that, although seems to be very specific to trans people, it's something that is applicable towards across the board, because a lot of this transitioning at work policy, it's literally about having breaks from work, having short sabbaticals with regards to health. And that can be applicable to people that if they break a wrist or a leg, if they develop cancer, if they have to take a break for any kind of illness, those same policies, the policies specific for transitional work, can be applied to all of those applications. So it's something very important that when we start tackling some of the barriers specific to one community, we see that there is an improvement that benefits all. Have LGBTQ safeguard if the people in your organization are working abroad, because in 74 countries, being part of being in the rainbow community means death. Work with local charities, organization, and consult with the LGBTQ plus community in your organization on what you can do, because sometimes there are a lot of changes that you want to do, but you don't know what could be the best one to start with. Ask them, because there might be something small or something very specific that would mean a major change and major improvement for them, but you won't know if you don't ask. And if you're thinking, oh, we don't have anyone, we're a big organization, we have no LGBTQ people, maybe wonder if there are some there that don't feel comfortable coming out, and maybe consider how can we make them more comfortable? What can we do to show? And I said, you need to be proactive. You need to be the one showing off that is a safe place to be out of work. And that is important, that you stamp out harassment, and it's important to have strong and transparent process which aims at protecting the victim first. If you don't have that, even if you think like, oh, harassment doesn't happen here, harassment can happen and people don't feel safe. You need to be showing that harassment will not be tolerated under any circumstance. You need to demonstrate that you have committing to inclusion, belonging, and justice with concrete steps. Find something to do. Can start small. You don't have to completely revolutionize your organization, but you should. But find something that is concrete. Show your commitment before you start putting a rainbow logo for in June. Okay, that is pretty much the spiel. And if you have any questions, the time that you're going to ask me now, but afterwards you can get in touch because Pride NSTEM, that's what we do. We are a charitable trust that try to help the community in whichever way we can. Most of our focus has been as informal science talk to create more role models and highlighting the issues that I have just told you about, but also to show that there are incredible people, incredible LGBTQ people working in STEM. We have a big social media presence, which helps, so we share resources, we promote other events, and we have been contributing to an all-party parliamentary group with the BSA to highlight these issues, and some of the results came out this summer, and I will suggest you'll go and take a look, because apart from our evidence, all the other contributions are very, very good across the board to improve diversity, equality, inclusion, belonging, and justice in STEM. We're not alone. There are plenty of other organizations that do incredible things. These are just some of the organization that work there. There is LGBT STEM, Founder Queer Scientists, Queer in Science, House of STEM in Ireland, Inter Engineering, Intertech, Out in STEM, and no GLSTP, now it's called Out to Innovate. I need to update that logo. And also last week was LGBTQ STEM Day, the International Day of LGBTQ people in science, technology, engineering, and maths. So it's going to be again in 2022 on November 18th. We are hoping next year to be able to do an in-person event. If you have a venue that would you kindly give to us, please do get in touch. And we tend to do a lot of online stuff. This year we launched a podcast specific to, I thought I had a page with a podcast, that's right. Specific to 4 different aspects of the community: sexuality, being LGBTQ plus in South Asian in the UK, in South Asian communities in the UK, talk about gender identity, and a final podcast about being pride in industry, plus a long discussion on YouTube. You can all find that on our socials and on our website. Is organized by many organizations that work just like Pride in STEM in the intersection of LGBTQ plus and STEM across the world. And we are supported by organizations from big labs to small departments all across the world. And here's the podcast stuff, and it was organized by the fantastic Dr. Craig Poku, climate scientist at the University of York. And these are some of the lovely things that we had. We had an astronaut, promoting LGBT STEM Day. It was Natural History Museum. It was also, we had a progress flag being flown in Antarctica, and I really enjoyed thinking that from space and throughout every continent, even Antarctica, we were all celebrating LGBTQ STEM Day. And with that, thank you very much. If you have any question, I think we have another 15-20 minutes for them.
Yeah, I think we've got a little bit longer than that. Actually,
oh, okay.
The next speaker is not.
I was really pacing through this.
You're so excited about all the work you've been doing. No, it's great. Yeah, no, it's really interesting talk. Some really useful and practical tips there of how we can all help to dismantle some of these barriers. Yeah, like you say, we're going to pass over now to the audience for questions. So just as before, if you'd like to ask a question, then either use the raise hand function and I can unmute you and you can ask it directly, or you can also type it in the chat and I can ask it on your behalf. Just while we wait for everyone, I guess might need a couple of minutes just to think of how to assemble their questions. I was wondering if you could provide any examples about how taking down some of these specific barriers to the LGBTQ plus community has also benefited people who are maybe not part of that community as well?
It's a great question. Exactly what I was talking about with the transitioning at work. I know of a woman that discussed with our university to have a stronger transitioning work policy because they had a great maternity and paternity leave policy that in the university, once you come back from your leave, you get more time for research and less time for teaching. So that allows you to catch up with the research, and then you can then slowly pick up teaching again. And they discuss, can this be applicable also for transitioning at work policy? And I'm like, oh yes, we don't see why not. It's actually shorter time, so we will reassess it in that way. And it turns out that since that change took place, I think almost 6 years, most of the people that took that policy is people that had cis people that had any kind of medical emergency, personal or of somebody in their family. So, and they found it that is incredibly successful for both supporting if they had any kind of medium-term illness of several months, but also as a support in terms of care. And that was something that a trans person thought, this is something that the community needs. But now the benefit is for everyone. And I think it's so important. This is why it is important that we discuss all the issues of the different aspects of the communities that require the needs to unbalance, readdress, because I'm sure that once we remove all of that, we will find an organization in which we are supported and we are all very comfortable working in.
Thanks, great answer. We've also got a couple of questions come in. Philippa says, or can you name an example of a great LGBTQ plus inclusion initiative that you've seen another organization do? Maybe one of your favorites.
One of my favorites. Well, I would say one of my favorites is 500 Queer Scientists. So it is a big database of queer scientists from across the world, and it was styled on 500 women scientists, which started, I think, a couple of years earlier. And that's the 500 women scientists was to increase the number of women that get called in by experts. And another thing that I noticed as a science journalist, whenever I send things are getting better, but often whenever I ask any organization, hey, is there an expert that can comment on that? They send a list of men. And that website was had the idea to, okay, you can search for women scientists that are happy to volunteer to give you expertise for journalists, and that raised the profile. And Founder a Queer Scientist doesn't work exactly like that. It was more for like showing, hey, there's a huge variation. There is a lot of us out there, and I think it's been very powerful. In a similar vein, LGBTQ STEM, that is based in the UK, has done deeper interviews with LGBTQ scientists. So while Find a Queer Scientist is sort of, you find a lot of people, you find so many such variation with LGBTQ STEM, you can go in much in more depth on what they do, who they are, etc. So I think those are fantastic. I know that is not everyone agrees that role models is the way to go in terms of changing organization, especially when it comes to the fact that role models are given the responsibility to like, oh, okay, now you're visible. Now it's your, please tell us what to do. Please fix this. Oh, what will we do that? And I completely understand that argument. At the same time, especially working in public engagement and science communication, I feel that there is such power in visibility, and I know that is often a tall ask, but there is so much change that is possible thanks to visibility.
So perhaps visibility and having someone as an inspiration more than putting the emphasis on an individual person to make the change.
Yeah, but this is why I think like stuff like Found a Queer Scientist, or even what we do with our outthinkers, we're trying to, for as much, there are some people that I think they're absolutely brilliant and I would want them every time. We try to change the people that we have as often as possible, simply because we want to show that there are so many people, and it's not it is a group effort to show that we are out there.
Sort of on that note of role models, I guess Sharon has asked about events or resources for secondary school level, so that's 11 to 18-year-olds, for as both her children are LGBTQ+, and trying to find role models for them is difficult, as you've said. Are there any resources for this age group?
So we have the LGBT plus in physics. I put some resources together. We have them on our website, but I am happy to share them in just a second. With posters, there is nothing quite so specific. I discussed a couple of years ago with the organizer of LGBT History Month. Because they were planning to do one specific to STEM, because they have every time they ask something specific, but they did run one in STEM, I think back in 2011, and the organizer told me that they pretty much just had Alan Turing, Sally Ride, that's it. There is a lot more out there, but I would say start with something like Found a Queer Scientist. There are some incredible people there just waiting to be found. Also, if you're like, oh, as I said, please do get in touch with me afterwards and say, hey, have you got a list of people that maybe they can research on Wikipedia or do something? Happy to send you a list. I have always a list ready, but there is a scarcity in actual specific resources, I'm afraid.
Thank you for that. And yeah, maybe an area that needs some work then.
Oh, absolutely. It's you see, Private STEM, it's small. We are a tiny charitable trust,
Yeah.
and we wish we could do more. And this is why I'm always like, I have a list. I don't have something concrete for you to put together. But I was recently at the Westminster Academy in London, and they actually have a wall of inspirational LGBTQ people in STEM with little description, and I just thought that it was the best thing I'd ever seen. Mostly because it was so well curated, and it wasn't just Alan Turing and Sally Ride, which are brilliant, absolutely brilliant, but it actually thought, okay, we want to have diversity across the rainbow community. We want to have diversity in terms of part of the world they originate from, on their ages, on alive. That it's been fantastic to see people. And I think it was a student initiative, seeing it that there is so much care. It is absolutely fantastic.
I think there's always a problem with, especially for charities, is time resources and people resources to create all these things. But yeah, it's nice to hear that there's other things going on. I guess on that note, since you can't rely on other people to do everything, do you have maybe just 2 or 3 top tips that everyone could take away of how they can be more supportive in general in STEM?
I think the most important thing is understand that it is okay to make mistakes, especially if you are trying to support communities that you don't belong to. And sometimes I make mistakes that this is advice that I gave you, but it's advice that I need to internalize as well, because I don't know, I feel that especially in STEM, we balance between the imposter syndrome and just like, no, I cannot do anything. Everyone will find out that I'm a fraud, to no, I am the best and I know everything. I am fantastic. And when it comes to, especially when you have good intention and you're really trying and you make mistakes, sometimes it's really hard to say sorry.
Oh, I think you've just been muted there. Oh, just for the last a couple of words.
It is important that we accept that we make mistakes, and so that is the first step. Is making a mistake is fine, and just learning from the mistake.
Oh, I'm not sure what's happened. You've just been muted again. I'm not sure what's happened.
Hey, somebody doesn't want me
yes.
to talk.
Someone's trying to shut down the conversation.
Yes, I feel that if you are willing to learn and willing to talk to other communities, that is very important. And I think it's using your privilege well. Is we all have our privileges, and if you can use that to make positive changes. And I know, like, I look at the state of things and I just, as I said, I get angry all the time, raging, because I can see that changes not only is necessary, but often the change that could happen so quickly, in my opinion, to just make those changes. But I do understand that things take time, there's processes, etc. Think about small concrete acts that can make an impact. And again, think of, talk to other groups, show solidarity and say, how can I help? Is there anything specific? Is there anything that you want to raise? I might have access to people that you might not, and I could argue on your behalf, but I need to know what is needed. So I think it is I think it is important to focus on things that are tangible. I see a lot. There have been quite few organizations that have been trying to do a lot and showing, oh, you see, we are such great supporters, but at the end of the day, came with very actually little concrete changes, and most they like to put their rainbow logos without having meaningful changes. And instead, I see other organizations in which they've been doing fewer things, but they've been doing them so well that I absolutely trust those organizations to actually support the community. I've seen from some organization so much love for the community, not oh, we support LGBTQ people, but actually showing, actually doing some changes to their organization that show to me that they actually are listening to LGBTQ people. And I feel that if you show that, then you're doing that. It's showing that you care about the community.
Quality over quantity, I guess.
Yes.
There's another question here from Sophie, who says, you mentioned some statistics for LGBTQ plus scientists in physics. Do you find the level of harassment in the community differs depending on the field of STEM that you're looking at?
So a lot of those surveys were very specific to certain disciplines. I discussed in STEM in general, but a lot of them were just physical sciences or just physics. I think the wider one was the last one, the one that came out this year. Yes, in January. There are some evidence showing that certain areas of STEM are more, there are different level of harassment, but also there are different level of harassment depending on which part of the community we're talking about. So there is not, sorry for the expression, one size fits all when it comes to harassment. We've already seen that there are minority within our community that are experiences more, but it's also very varied compared to STEM. And there are some peculiar exception in which, for example, there are members of our community that experience less harassment, a lot less harassment compared to other communities in the same field. And it's simply because of prejudice and how certain disciplines are gendered and certain disciplines are seen, well, the soft sciences, the hard sciences, and we all know that is absolutely ridiculous, but and all our preconception about us, society, and other people are obviously projected on science, because science is a human endeavor. So I'm afraid that there is nothing with strong evidence that could just say, oh, if you're in engineering and I don't know, you're a lesbian, you'll suffer less harassment. But there is a lot more complexity when we start breaking apart the STEM acronym and the LGBTQI+ acronym.
Thank you. I think, so we've got another 15 minutes until the next talk, but it doesn't look like there's any more questions in, although my computer is doing something weird and freezing. So if there is,
I don't see any more questions, okay, but if anyone has a quick one here, please do ask. Otherwise, I can just conclude with, please continue to support us and listen to our podcast, watch our videos, share our tweets.